What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you are ready to answer a tough question here today. It's June, which means it's kind of the last chance we have to really think about some bigger picture things before the season begins. Next month, it's July, training camp time. Boom. After that, it's the preseason. Boom. After that, the regular season. Soon enough, confetti's going to be falling on the Dallas Cowboys, obviously out in Los Angeles when they win Super Bowl 56, but we don't have to fast forward all the way there. What we're talking about today is something that's going to happen next offseason, and that is really how the Dallas Cowboys are going to handle one of the best players on their team. Who are we talking about? Well, it is, of course, wide receiver Michael Gallup. In case you did not know, 2021 is the final season in which the Dallas Cowboys have Michael Gallup under contract, which means he is going to get paid next year. Michael Gallup has been an incredible wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, really announced himself in the 2019 season for the team, had over 1,100 yards, obviously was on pace to do something really historic last year, as was the entire Cowboys offense before Dak Prescott was injured in Week 5. Logic suggests that Michael Gallup and the rest of the Cowboys offense will be singing and soaring all throughout 2021. And considering he is due to be paid in 2022, that suggests that Michael Gallup will be paid. Now, the Dallas Cowboys paid Amari Cooper very, very recently. In fact, the Dallas Cowboys paid Amari Cooper last year. And the Dallas Cowboys also spent a first-round pick last year on CeeDee Lamb. So conventional wisdom suggests that in 2022, the Dallas Cowboys are going to let Michael Gallup walk, go get paid by whoever it is. Maybe it's somebody like the Baltimore Ravens, Indianapolis Colts. Who knows what the NFL is going to look like next spring. The Cowboys will, just like they always like to do, pick up a compensatory pick in what will be 2023, and they'll press on forward with Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb as their top two wide receivers. It's only a matter of time before CeeDee Lamb establishes himself as the true alpha in the wide receiver room, but having options like Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup outside of him is hardly an unfortunate way to live. So all that being said, we have asked this question before, but should the Cowboys trade Michael Gallup? What's going to happen with Michael Gallup? Because that's really the question, right? That's the important question is, will Michael Gallup be a Cowboy in 2022? And it's hard to answer that question because in a lot of senses, it does seem like the Cowboys are not necessarily pitting Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup against one another, but there is logic to keeping him on the team and seeing who outperforms the other. If Amari Cooper continues to be a baller, which, you know, is kind of the Amari Cooper way, the next season, he's still very young. I mean, he's not much older than Michael Gallup in terms of real life age. Obviously, he's been in the NFL a bit longer, but if Amari Cooper's still performing at a high level, why move on from him? Obviously, Michael Gallup's going to command a lot of money. Amari Cooper got $20 million a year from the Cowboys a year ago, as mentioned. But if Amari Cooper starts to falter, if Amari Cooper starts to wither, if Michael Gallup continues the path that he's on, the trajectory that he's on, and he is establishing himself as a better wide receiver than Amari Cooper in 2022 and beyond, it's possible. And again, we've talked about this. The Cowboys could just cut Amari Cooper, get out of that deal. They only have to eat $6 million in dead money next year and pay Michael Gallup. Obviously, they have CeeDee Lamb. And so having somebody of this caliber opposite of him is what makes this whole thing a little bit more easy to swallow and a little bit more easy to digest. But what is going to happen with Michael Gallup? Why are we even talking about this? Because I know that it makes you uneasy. It gives you indigestion to think about moving on from Michael Gallup. Well, MG13 was on Good Morning Football on Monday, and he was asked about his contract situation with the Dallas Cowboys because it is a contract year for him. Here was what Michael Gallup told Good Morning Football. You're obviously going to think about it, but you can't really do anything about it except go out on the field and do what you're supposed to do. You're not going to get that contract if you don't do what you're supposed to on the field first. I think one thing to think about, you can't talk anything into the future. You've just got to do what you're supposed to do right now. For me, it's just going out there, helping this club win ball games, have fun doing it. Obviously, I'd love to stay here, love to be in Dallas, love the community, love the city, love the fans. Hey, that's us. So it's up in the air, but I want to be right here. So we'll see. It's tough, right? Like, we don't want to see Michael Gallup go anywhere else. We would love for him to play for the Cowboys forever, but it's just not feasible when next year in 2022, you're going to have CeeDee Lamb entering his third season with the Dallas Cowboys. He'll be eligible for an extension after that one, by the way. And Amari Cooper, if he is, again, still playing at a high level, playing for $20 million per season. I think it would take something unbelievable for Michael Gallup to become one of the highest paid wide receivers in the NFL in terms of like top 3 money. And if he did play that well, it stands to reason that the Cowboys would move on from Amari and keep Michael Gallup. They really could choose between one or the other. But obviously, there is some sense to saying, okay, you know what? The Cowboys are probably not going to have Michael Gallup on their team next year, right? Like that's a fair conclusion to jump to or to get to. You don't even have to jump. You can just take one step. So if that's the case, why not move on from him now, right? It's going to be painful. It's going to suck. And obviously he helps the team in the here and now, but you have other options if you're the Cowboys in terms of that third wide receiver spot. You have Cedric Wilson. You have Simi Fehoko. By the way, we've got a film review on Simi coming out later on this week at Blogging the Boys, so make sure and stay tuned for that. The fantastic Matt Minich always does a great job. So maybe you expedite that. Plus, I mean, you know, we've talked so much about the Cowboys playing out of 11 personnel so that you can have all of these people on the field. The moment you shift to 12 personnel is the moment that Michael Gallup comes off the field. However, you now live in a day and age as a Cowboys fan where you know that Dalton Schultz is a viable second tight end option. So you could seemingly have both Dalton and Blake Jarwin out there rocking 12 personnel. That is a little bit of a backward step in terms of the progression that the NFL as a whole is taking these days. But still, you do have options, which is the ultimate point if you do want to move on from Michael Gallup. So with all that being said, I ask you, should the Dallas Cowboys trade Michael Gallup? I'll allow you wherever you are to answer the question out loud. Maybe you want to write it down kind of Jeff Probst style on Survivor, put it on a little piece of paper, put it in the what's it called, the urn or whatever, and then hold it up to the camera before you do that and tell me yes or no. Should the Cowboys trade Michael Gallup? The argument against it, simple. He helps your football team here in the here and now. He makes your football team better in the here and now. With Michael Gallup on your roster, you are a better football team. So moving him hinders you in that capacity. But moving him expedites the pick that you get. It's very possible, again, that based on the future contract that Michael Gallup is going to sign with Team TBD in 2022, that you, the Dallas Cowboys, are going to net a compensatory pick. However, that will not come until 2023. Do you know how far away 2023 is from now? It's like 6 years away. All right, so if you're the Cowboys, you could say, you know what, let's move him now, and we'll get that draft compensation in 2022. We'll fast forward it a year. Yes, we'll have to deal without Michael Gallup, but we will get that compensation sooner rather than later. That is an interesting thing. That is something that is worth getting excited about. What's more is that if you move him in the here and now, whatever team that is ultimately going to be acquiring him not only could give you that compensation in the here and now, but something you have working for you potentially is that that team can net the compensatory pick if he ultimately leaves that team for a third team in free agency next offseason. So there are a lot of factors to consider here. And something worth saying before, we get to potential trade compensation is what the Cowboys have going on at wide receiver. Here is every wide receiver on the Dallas Cowboys roster if you're watching along, and I don't know why you wouldn't be watching along. The only way you could be hearing this or seeing this is on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe right here to the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. Some of these players, again, are training camp bodies, going to have some nice moments in the preseason. But in terms of serious names, these are listed alphabetically for you, by the way. Noah Brown, I think, is on the roster bubble. We'll see. Maybe Simi Fehoko beats him out. I think that's the case, or the hope, obviously. But again, in terms of serious, undeniable, certainly, absolutely, positively going to be on the Cowboys roster in 2021, you have Amari Cooper. Simi Fehoko is kind of on that border right now. Maybe he's a practice squad guy. We'll wait and see. Michael Gallup, duh. CeeDee Lamb, duh. Cedric Wilson, duh. There is some room for competition beyond that, but wide receiver is a position in the NFL where you can find studs all over the place. Consider that the guy we're talking about, Michael Gallup, was a third-round pick. And so the Cowboys, remember, had 3 third-round picks ultimately this past draft, not only because they had a compensatory pick for Byron Jones walking, but because of the trade down from 10 to 12, which landed them Micah Parsons and ultimately an extra third-round pick, as mentioned. So, I mean, the value of getting a third-round pick or a second-round pick is there because that's what's potentially going to be coming your way in terms of compensatory picks are concerned. But the point is, it's not like you can only find elite wide receivers in the first round. Not everybody is Amari Cooper, who was the 4th overall pick, or CeeDee Lamb, the 17th overall pick. You can find studs and ballers later on in the draft. Michael Gallup is, again, evidence of that particular idea. Now, we also live in a moment here in the NFL where a star wide receiver has recently been traded. The Tennessee Titans traded with the Atlanta Falcons to acquire Julio Jones. Shout out to the Titans, by the way, because of the trade. The Dallas Cowboys will not have to face Julio Jones in 2021. Very exciting stuff. I bet Dan Quinn is pumped about this, but and this isn't an apples to apples comparison, and we'll explain that in a moment, but here is what the Titans had to give up in order to land Julio. The Titans received Julio Jones and Atlanta's 6th round pick in 2023. So that is the net gain for Tennessee. The net loss, what Atlanta received, that would be the Cowboys in this particular instance, this particular hypothetical, a 2nd round pick next year. That's what we're kind of looking for, is a 2nd round pick. That's what we really want. And a 4th round pick in 2023. Now, you're probably thinking, this is Julio Jones, though, RJ. I love Michael Gallup, but there's no way he's going to command this type of thing, and this is what Julio Jones commanded. Wrong. That's where you made a mistake. Julio Jones, as incredible as he is, going to be an argument. I mean, we'll certainly see what happens with his career in Tennessee and beyond that, and how that will add to this, but going to be in the discussion for the Pro Football Hall of Fame someday in the future. One of the best wide receivers of the last decade, one of the star wide receivers of his era, Julio Jones, is incredible. What I'm about to say is in no way intended to be some sort of slight or some sort of demerit against the prolific career that has been Julio Jones. Now, that being said, he has been in the NFL for a decade. It was 10 years ago that the Atlanta Falcons drafted Julio Jones, which means that Julio Jones is 32 years old. Michael Gallup is not. Julio Jones, also by virtue of being a star wide receiver for this long, costs a lot of money. In fact, one of the reasons I would assume that the Falcons had to give up a 6th round pick in 2023 is because, yes, the Titans are getting Julio Jones out of this, but they are also taking on Julio's $15.3 million salary and the totality and the duration of Julio Jones's contract, which runs through 2023. So, I mean, while Julio is a baller and may turn the Titans offense into something a little bit more legitimate in 2021, the Cowboys will visit Tennessee themselves next season in 2022. So they will get to see Julio the Titan. But it's tough. I mean, even for legit stud wide receivers taking on $15.3 million and the duration of that whole contract is a tough sell. That's why there wasn't this huge market for Julio Jones. And I know that what I'm about to say might sound ridiculous to you. And you know what? It doesn't sound ridiculous to you because you're an educated fan. You're a smart person. How do I know this? Because you're here. You subscribe to the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. But I know that you have a friend or you have a family member, the person who you text and you talk to about the Cowboys all the time. You share all the news and you guys are discussing what's going on in the world of America's team. And that person, when you guys started talking about Michael Gallup, that person said, there's no way that Dallas is going to get anything close to what Atlanta got for Julio Jones. And that's where you say, whoa, Miss Lippy, you got a pet. That's a response that, wait a minute, that's the actual bit from Billy Madison. What you say to them is Michael Gallup is much younger than Julio Jones. He is just entering his prime NFL age. What's more is while Julio Jones' salary in 2021 is $15.3 million, do you know what Michael Gallup's is? It's $2.4 million in 2021 because he is on the last year of that 3rd round rookie contract, again, a 3rd round pick of the Cowboys back in 2018. And so all of that being said, I think that it's certainly fair to believe, in fact, it's more than fair, it's extremely logical to believe that the Cowboys would get something very legitimate in return for Michael Gallup in 2021. If the Cowboys traded Michael Gallup today, tomorrow, 2 days from now, whenever you're watching this, if you're watching this 2 days from now, by the way, what took you so long? We've been here. We've been hanging out. But if the Cowboys wanted to move Michael Gallup today, they would very, very, very likely net a 2nd round pick in return. I think that that's easy. That's the starting point of the conversation. And unlike the Atlanta Falcons in this case, I don't think the Cowboys would have to give up a 6th round pick because they don't have to ask another team to take on that whole salary. They don't have to ask another team to take on that massive contract. What the Cowboys do have to ask another team to take on in this particular case is the fact that Michael Gallup is entering a contract here. So let's make up a team. This is purely a hypothetical. Let's say the Baltimore Ravens were interested in trading for Michael Gallup. The lone con for the Ravens trading for Michael Gallup is he could leave in free agency. If you're the Ravens, it's tough for you to part with a 2nd round pick, even a 3rd round pick, although a 3rd round is kind of a wash in this case. It's tough for you to part with one of those selections and go get Michael Gallup. Yes, you'll have some good times this particular season, but what if he leaves in free agency? Then you gave up this draft pick and you don't have anything left. You're just sitting there holding an empty bag, and that would suck. And so maybe it's a 3rd round pick. Maybe that's the settling price. Maybe the Cowboys have to give up Michael Gallup and call it a 6th-round pick in order to bump that up to a 2nd-round pick. And I think that there's a lot of logic to suggesting that that move makes sense for the Cowboys. We're talking about a Cowboys team, which, by the way, now on the subject of contracts, on the subject of money, on the subject of all those dollar signs and big loads of cash, now you have a Dallas Cowboys team that has Dak Prescott making a whole lot of money. We've talked about this. Mike McCarthy appeared on the Chris Collinsworth with Richard Sherman podcast and talked about how they had 11 picks, and that was by design. Obviously, again, they did trade back in the 1st round with the Philadelphia Eagles to take Micah Parsons. The Cowboys had 11 picks, and I will be shocked, I will be stunned if all 11 draft picks make their roster. But the true value, no pun intended, towards having 11 draft picks is that you have 11 cheap rookie contracts. And that's where the Cowboys have to be really wise and really smart in the future, is they have to go get this young, cheap talent, this young, cheap workforce, because now their quarterback is taking up so much of their salary cap, rightly so, because he's the best player on their team. But you have to adjust for that, because if you don't, you're going to be paying a lot of guys. And that's why, maybe you've been saying this whole conversation, well, RJ, how do you know the Cowboys aren't going to pay Michael Gallup in 2021? Follow the money, man. They've paid Dak Prescott. They've paid Ezekiel Elliott. We'll see what happens there. They've obviously paid every player on their offensive line just about. We'll see what happens to Connor Williams this year, who's also, by the way, in a contract year. They've paid Amari Cooper. They even paid Blake Jarwin. CeeDee Lamb, while he has not gotten a second contract in the NFL, is, like we said, a 1st-round draft pick. So there are a lot of big resources invested on the offensive side of the ball for the Cowboys, whether they are 1st-round draft picks, a lot of them happen to be incidentally, or second contracts with the team. That's why they need all of this talent. That's why they spent all those draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. They need cheap, elite talent. And so how do you get cheap elite talent? Well, you draft highly. You draft near the top. You spend a lot of 1st and 2nd round and 3rd round picks on the defensive side of the ball. The Cowboys, for the first time in franchise history, spent their first 6 draft picks this year on the defensive side of the ball, because that side needed a makeover, and they don't have the financial wherewithal to go do that more easily like other NFL teams do by virtue of free agency. Now, none of this is to say that the Cowboys are excused from not spending money in free agency. A lot of people will tell you the salary cap is a myth, and I'm not trying to dispute that claim. The salary cap can be worked. If an NFL team wants to accomplish something, they can truly find a way to do it. They are never up against a wall by way of the salary cap, but it is still a real thing. It's not this made up thing. But the point is, it can be amended, but it is definitely a hurdle that has to be crossed and overcome at different points. And so the Cowboys have to be forward thinking. And that sucks, because when you get to this point, you have a lot of players who are really good, and you're going to have to say goodbye to some, right? You're going to have to watch elite players like Byron Jones leaving free agency. You're going to have to see some guys who are nice are going to go get overpaid by other teams, like Robert Quinn and the Chicago Bears last year. Michael Gallup, as awesome as he is, as incredible as he's been over the last 3 years for the Dallas Cowboys, it is just about as stone cold of a guarantee as you could possibly have that he is not going to be on this team next year. In fact, I mean, I would argue it is the more likely thing that Michael Gallup is not going to be on the team this year. And so it's Michael Gallup's time to answer all of the contract questions. It's Michael Gallup's time to kind of field all of the same things that all of his teammates have had to do. Dak Prescott had to answer all the contract stuff. Zeke Elliott, every offensive lineman. Everybody goes through this rite of passage at one point or another in the NFL. It's simply Michael Gallup's turn. But unlike those other players where the Cowboys were still kind of building their nucleus, it was really obvious that at a certain point, the Cowboys were going to pay Dak Prescott. At least that was the hope, and thankfully it ended up being the case. It was really obvious that the Cowboys were going to pay Amari Cooper because they had traded a first-round pick to get him in 2018, and they ultimately did. Michael Gallup, it is pretty obvious that the team is just simply loaded, and they not necessarily can't, but they won't, because it doesn't make as much sense as it does to spend that money elsewhere, whatever money they ultimately have available. So would it be awesome to have Michael Gallup on the Cowboys roster in 2021? Yes, duh. Nobody is disputing that. But it would also make some sense to be a little bit forward thinking. And it is interesting how much these, conversations change over the course of a year. Last year at this time, when the New York Jets were getting ready to shop Jamal Adams, obviously he was somebody who was connected to the Cowboys. At the time, Gary Myers, who obviously is well-versed in the media in both New York and Dallas, just kind of hypothetically suggested the Cowboys trading a first-round draft pick and Michael Gallup for Jamal Adams. And obviously that didn't happen, and Jamal wound up getting traded to Seattle. But at the time, if you were on Twitter.com or if you read the article we wrote at blogontheboys.com, there were a lot of Cowboys fans that rightly, by the way, at the time said that they would not even trade Michael Gallup straight up for Jamal Adams. And that made sense. There was a lot of logic to that. And it's not like things have changed to the point that the Cowboys are rebuilding or anything dramatic like that. But it's just, there's less sand in the hourglass. And when there's less sand in the hourglass falling down, things become clearer. Things become easier to kind of come to terms with. And it's easier now to come to terms with the fact that this is very likely Michael Gallup's last season with the Dallas Cowboys, which means it would make some sense for the Cowboys to cash out now, although he can obviously help them in their quest to win the Super Bowl this year. And so maybe that's where you fall. Maybe you say, I don't care if it makes sense. I don't care if there's logic. I want to hold Michael Gallup as long as I possibly can. We'll win the Super Bowl this year. If he wants to walk in free agency, I'm fine taking the compensatory pick in 2023. There's logic to both sides here. This is truly one of those situations where you can make the argument one way or the other. But one thing that I can promise you is that all of these contract conversations are going to be happening with Michael Gallup. The Dak thing is over and done with, thankfully. And the Michael Gallup thing will not even come anywhere close to that in terms of drama or in terms of hype or in terms of encircling sort of storylines and narratives. But Michael Gallup is the next guy up. We know seemingly that the Cowboys aren't going to pay Leighton Vander Esch because they declined his fifth-year option for 2022. It remains to be seen whether the Cowboys are going to pay Connor Williams in 2022. I would assume not, but maybe they end up working something out. It just depends, too. I mean, you could end up in a situation in 2022 where the market doesn't really lend itself to Michael Gallup's liking. Perhaps, maybe next year, the market is just kind of in a weird place, and Michael Gallup will say, you know what, I'll sign a one-year deal with the Cowboys, and I'll come back, and I'll hit the open market again next year. There's a lot of possibilities, and that's kind of a low probability one, but it does exist. I think the overwhelming probability is that Michael Gallup is elsewhere in 2022, and we'll certainly wish him well. We'll certainly root for him, but get ready for some contract talk, some contract discussion when it comes to the wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. He's awesome, and other NFL teams know that, and if you want to cash out now, that makes sense. If you want to hold on and ride this out until the very end, that makes sense. There are a lot of things that make sense here, and that's what makes this a really fun conversation to have. So all that being said, of course, the Michael Gallup conversation will continue as we roll on. I mentioned that we have a Simi Fehoko film review coming to you later on this week on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. We have a lot of fun stuff coming to you always on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. We work hard 24/7, 365 to keep you up to date on all things America's team. You are the best Dallas Cowboys fans in the world, and it is our job to make sure that you are always up to date, always prepared, always happy. So if you have something that would make you happy, something you want to see us talk about, don't be afraid to tell us. We work for you. Tell us in the comments what you want us to talk about. Obviously, we have to hit some things because the world is always spinning. Things are always happening. There are always juicy storylines when it comes to America's team, as you well know. But if there's something you want us to talk about, I promise you we will take it into consideration and do everything that we can to make sure that we get to it. I'm RJ Ochoa. As mentioned, you know me, of course, from Blogging the Boys. You know me from here, from our podcast, from our website. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at RJ Ochoa. And you can do me a huge favor. I don't ask you for a lot, but you can have the best day of all time. Whatever day you're watching this, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, have the greatest day of all time. You know why? Because you deserve it. We'll see you next time.